Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Cybersecurity, How It Affects the Insurance Industry. This webinar is scheduled for 3 hours and will conclude by 4 p.m. Since the same attendance rules apply to this webinar that apply to live classroom instruction, before we start the webinar today, I'm going to take a few minutes to read the mandatory announcements as required by the New York State Department of Financial Services. Provider, course, and instructor approval documents issued by the New York State Department of Financial Services are available for viewing by each attendee. These documents serve as documentation that your course is currently approved for credit. They also verify the approved number of credits, the license classes eligible to receive credit, and the course approval number, which you will need to renew your license. During the instructional period, you may not conduct insurance or other business or read materials unrelated to the course. All electronic devices must be silenced and texting is not permitted. The New York State Department of Financial Services requires attendance for 100% of the approved class hours. If you arrive after class has begun or if you are late returning from breaks, you may be denied credit for the course. If attendance requirements are not followed, instructors and providers may face disciplinary action, in which case credits will be jeopardized. When you have successfully completed a course, you will be issued a course completion document showing the course approval number, eligible license classes, and the number of credits you have received for completing the class. Retain this certificate to use when renewing your license and in the event of a department audit as proof you took the course. Remember, you cannot use credits for any course more than one time per eligible license class. If you would like to ask a question or you have a problem viewing the webinar, please type the question in the dialog box in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. We have included copies of Big Eye New York's CE provider approval, instructor approval, and course approval documents for your reference. This program is approved for 3 CE in New York and 3 Connecticut CE credits. Per New York State CE requirements, we will conduct 2 random unannounced attendance checks per hour. Each attendee must respond to the questions that will appear on your computer screen in order to earn credit. They will remain on screen for 1 minute and cannot be removed. Did you know that we can help you with cyber liability and privacy coverage? Our superstar team will be happy to help you get started. Have you registered for Connect on November 9th in Connecticut? You definitely don't want to miss it. It's going to sell out fast, so secure your seat now. And we have a big announcement coming soon about Go Big 2024, so please be sure to keep an eye out for it. It's going to be amazing. Before I introduce you to our instructor, I would like to give a huge shout out to AmWins and IPFS, our sponsors for today's webinar. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to our instructor today, Walter Contreras. Walter is the founder of Motiva Networks and continues to serve as the company's CEO. With over 25 years of information technology experience, Walter directs Motiva's business strategy and oversees all operations. Under Walter's leadership, Motiva has expanded to a comprehensive set of IT services, including cybersecurity, regulatory compliance, custom software development, FOIA implementation, disaster recovery, and a 24/7 technical help desk. He is also a frequent guest speaker at industry events where he shares insights on market strategy, business development, e-commerce, and the technologies that make it all work. Good afternoon, Walter.
Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm going to turn on my camera here. Hello.
There you are.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay. Are we able to see that, Lisa?
I see both. Yes, I see you and your screen.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Walter Contreras, and today we're going to have fun. I want to make this as interactive as possible. This is a class after all. And what I want to do today is I want to empower you with some great information about cybersecurity. And I want you to take some of this information and go into the marketplace and put it into practice. Some of this information will help you create more business for your agency, but also understand the landscape of cybersecurity in general. So we'll talk about a lot of things. We had 3 hours together. I have some great questions to ask you, so please pay attention. There will be some questions during each break. If you have a notepad, that will be great, so you can take some notes. But let's get started. Okay, so I have been serving your community for the last 25 years. Actually, I sponsored the first event about 25 years ago, and it's been a pleasure focusing in this industry. This industry, in my opinion, it's a very needed industry, and it happens to be one of those that it does great all the time, helping small to medium-sized businesses. So we're going to cover a few things today. We're going to talk about cybersecurity in 2023, which has quite changed pre-COVID, and in my opinion, is going to continue to rise. I want to explain to you why you are a target, and more importantly, that full sense of security that some of us may have. Right? I want to introduce you to some concept. We're starting to see a lot of insurance companies asking for things like EDR or MDR, and I want to educate you on these acronyms. And this is something where you want to pay really good attention, because these are some of those things that, in my opinion, are the ones that are going to be a big deal going forward. I want to introduce you and empower you to learn more and understand how you can fight back. How can your agency not only fight back yourself, but also help your customers do that? Okay, so I'm gonna give you some quick numbers. About 50% of cyber attacks are targeted to small businesses, but 60% of victims go out of business within 6 months. That's a fact. It's a very quick thing, and more than half of U.S. financial institutions were hit by a ransomware within a year. So if you think about it, if you look around, I don't know if you're in a group with more people or more business, but if you think about it, out of these 10 businesses, only 4 will survive within the next 6 months. Now, the reason why this is happening is because there are many forms of cybersecurity attacks, and I want to go through each and every one so you kind of understand each one. So let's talk about phishing. You probably heard a lot about it. It's a practice that employs criminals to trick you, right? So you'll see a lot of these attempts happening via email, and they typically the emails that you'll get seem and feel legitimate, right? So they trick you into clicking on emails that look very legit. The reality is that some of these hacking attacks pretend to be co-workers, maybe customers, right? Maybe somebody you're doing business with, and so they're very deceiving. Sorry, at least I'm having a little bit of trouble with my slide. Not sure why. Here we go. So they look something like this, right? You've probably seen one of these emails that look legitimate, but they aren't. By the way, quick note here, if you have any questions, please make sure you put it on the questions section. If you want me to go over something else during the Q&A section, I'll be happy to do so. So the second form of attack that I want you to begin to understand is something we call business email compromise, or BEC. This type of attack is a little different because it kind of focuses on pretending to be somebody that works within your organization. So you'll see emails coming from your CEO that is urgently requesting things like funds. You probably heard a few customers ask you, like, or tell you stories about how they got this request from their bosses, but the reality is that these are not legitimate emails. And as you can see here, the majority of these attacks are impersonated from people of trust, and hackers know that, right? They know that you're gonna be looking for emails that look like this and saying, "Oh, my boss is asking me to send this payment, or handle this card." I heard a story about somebody who went all over Best Buy to purchase gift cards because their boss had asked them, their boss, quote unquote, had asked them to go do that. And I think they purchased like 7 or 8 gift cards. And then the hacker was asking them for the code via email to like scratch the code and give it to them. And that's how they got breached. But, so you see a lot of that. I also saw another company that they got an email like this from their boss who was on vacation. The hacker was in their email, so they knew that the boss was on vacation, and they asked for a money transfer that they needed money urgently in the Bahamas. So the manager went on and sent the wire, but it was actually going to a hacker. So this is another form, and of course, ransomware, right? How many of you, by showing your hand, have actually seen a ransomware live? I'm just gonna look here. Just raise your hand if you have seen. Yeah. So it's a horrific thing, right? Because ransomware is a form of malicious software that essentially what happens is if you click on that email or downloaded a file, the attacker is going to ask for a ransom. And in many cases, because you're connected to the internet, the attacker will go out and get an encrypted key from their servers and lock your computers and your systems. The thing about ransomware is anything that's connected to that network, to that office, will get infected. So even if you have a USB drive connected to that computer or that server, everything will be encrypted. And the only way to get it back is if you have a backup, which I don't see a lot of people having backups these days, or if you pay the ransom, right? So those are the instances of which you can get it back. They do typically ask, obviously, for money. It's in the form of Bitcoin, so and it's usually targeted to small businesses. We always say, oh, only big businesses like CNA will hit with ransomware attack, but that is actually not true. We see a ton of small businesses getting hit. The thing is, you just don't hear about it, right? So there's a whole reputational thing that happens there. Another form of attack, and by the way, just make note of each of one of these attacks because we'll ask questions at the end. But another form of attack is this concept of zero-day flaws. What this really is a vulnerability in the software code, right? So you may have an Alexa or some sort of a hardware device or even software, right? That even the manufacturer of that software or the hardware doesn't know yet that they have a flaw. So hackers are really good at looking for that, and you see a large number of programs having that problem. In fact, this is a big one. I want to show you a funny picture right now, but this is a big one about companies that may not even know that they have an issue, right? Or IT teams. There was a company on Long Island that actually had an issue in their software that they didn't find out until they were breached. So, and you probably see the news, a lot of these 0 day, you probably hear the word 0 day and you don't know what it is, but essentially what it is a flaw in the code that companies don't know yet. Okay. And of course, the new one, artificial intelligence, machine learning, you're probably hearing a lot about it. The truth is that these systems are making it easier for hackers, right? I can tell you that if you think that these hackers are very smart computer engineers, they really aren't. A lot of this software is prepackaged for them. They buy it on the dark web and then they just start using it. So you really don't need a lot of knowledge to be able to do these things. But artificial intelligence is really, in our view of it, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because it makes things easier. In fact, things like ChatGPT, who I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about it, these systems, you can even create this code simply by asking ChatGPT to make that software. So it's gonna be a much harder thing to chase in the future because it just keeps getting better and better over time. The Internet of Things, what we know as IoT, is really think about it, almost every device that you have in your home or office, right? So things like Alexas, your Siris, all these things, the introduction of those things make our life easier, but it actually makes it easier for some hackers. So I'm gonna show you something really funny, only because I thought it was hilarious that a coffee machine was used to send a ransomware attack back in 2021. This is a video of that breach. Let me see if it plays real quick. Um, yeah, so this is I know this is funny, right? It's a coffee machine, but you know, this is how hackers get into systems. And here it is, the pretend hacker breaching the coffee machine. So you'll see in a minute that the machine just becomes unresponsive. There's no coffee. So there it is. So I know it's funny, I know it's silly, but believe it or not, this company got breached because the coffee machine was breached, and that's how they got into the network. Don't check your coffee machines right now. You're probably not connected to the internet with them, but just a funny thought. Okay, so cyber insurance has become a necessity for many businesses. I actually think that many insurance agents don't really talk about it, perhaps because they don't know about it. They're not well versed in the topic, and they feel like they probably don't know much. So I want to give you some pointers. I want to help you understand a little bit more about this, and hopefully after this webinar, you'll understand a little bit better how to talk to your customer about cyber insurance and some of these things. So by show of hands, how many of you guys offer cyber insurance, by the way? Okay. Okay. Yeah, so cyber insurance is a necessity now, right? So when you think about it, uh, cyber insurance isn't cybersecurity, right? It's not protecting the systems and networks to be able to uh, avoid a breach or anything like that. It's just helping them hopefully pay for some of those instances. So between 2017 and 2021, 98% of claims were made by small or medium-sized businesses. And so this is growing massively right now. If you're an agent who's serving small to medium-sized businesses, this is a tremendous opportunity for you, right? And so ransomware related claims went up 77% in the first quarter of 2023. I mean, that's a staggering number, right? When you think about how fast these things are happening. And so I want you to kind of think about how you could position yourself with your customers and teach them about these threats. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to show you how we help other agencies not only protect themselves, but actually by partnering with them and helping them educate their customers as well, right? So the concept here is that a lot of us don't think that we're going to be hit by one of these attacks, right? So 59% of small businesses don't have cybersecurity. And I could tell you that one of the things that we do in our organization is help businesses understand the risk, right? So we'll help them by doing a cybersecurity risk assessment. And a lot of the times it's a self-assessment, so they'll get to do it. And one of the questions I ask people is, when was the last time you had a cybersecurity assessment? And the, the answer is almost all the time, never. They never had a cyber assessment. They never looked into systems that can potentially be breached. So that is the risk that I believe almost every one of your customers is facing today, right? That they have yet to take a look at some of these threats. And then when you think about it, the amount of people that are not looking at this is just crazy to me. So small businesses with less than 100 employees are 350% more likely to be hit with threats and attacks than bigger organizations. Again, we don't hear about it, so it's sort of like one of those things that because we don't hear about it, we think they're okay, but they're actually not. So Lisa, how am I doing with time?
You are doing great. There are several questions that have come in. I actually chatted them to you so you don't have to look in the question box.
Okay, let me just see real quick. While I'm looking for that chat, I'm gonna post the cybersecurity challenge. Give me 1 second, guys. There it is. Okay, cool. So here's Dora the Explorer. Here's some questions that, if you guys don't mind, take a look at each one of them. Which threat involves deceiving individuals into revealing sensitive information, such as ransomware, phishing, zero-day flaw? Just look at every one of these questions and try to answer them yourselves and see how we do. While you're answering these questions, I'm gonna see, Lisa, one of the questions is, what is the percentage between commercial versus personal attack? So I'll be 100% honest with you. We don't do any personal, we don't deal with any personal business, but on the commercial side, we see a massive amount. I think it's quite related. If a business owner gets breached on the personal side, that can spill over into the business side. So that's how we think about it. You know, we're always looking at as a holistic approach rather than individual. A large business self-insuring. Lisa, I'm not sure about that question. Self-insuring in the sense of if they're policing themselves to cybersecurity, is that what they meant?
I assume it has to do with, are they self-insuring their cyber?
Oh, I
Because
see what
that
you mean.
came in at that time.
By the way, you guys have some competition, right? Because what we're seeing in the IT world is that some of these companies that make software to protect businesses are going into the insurance business now. They're starting to provide quotes because they know, look, if you have this particular software, and I'll teach you some of them as we go along, but if you had this particular software, you're more than likely not going to be breached than someone who do not have that software. So there's a lot of competition coming into this business, and we'll talk about how you're going to fight back. I know this doesn't have to do with insurance, but can there be attacks on child video monitors? Oh, 100%. I mean, I saw a video on YouTube about this family who had a baby monitor, and from time to time somebody will come through the baby monitor and talk. That happened to Alexa as well. They're quite breachable. There is a setting on Alexa where you don't share that kind of information, but this does happen quite a bit. Would you be possible to get copies of your site? Oh, absolutely. We'll share the slides. So I'm gonna move on to, and I'll answer more of these questions on the Q&A side, but I want to see how well you guys did on this quiz. So here's Dora the Explorer. Here's the answer to the questions. Just see how well you did, guys, and comment on the chat. But here's the answers, right? So number 1 is B, number 2 is business email compromise, number 3 is 60%, number 4 is 60%, and number 5 is C is in Charlie. So I hope you guys did really well on that. Thank you, Dora. Okay, so going back to the Q&A, we'll get copies of, are things like ChatGPT dangerous in this same way? Well, let's define danger, right? Because what I was referring to before with ChatGPT is that in ChatGPT, you can actually tell the AI to build software for you, what we call code. And it could also verify code. So in the past, hackers will have to buy the software, either prepackaged on the dark web or download a copy that maybe contains some malicious code for them as well, because they too get breached. Now all they have to do is they run that code inside of ChatGPT, and ChatGPT will verify whether that code works or not. So in that way, yes, it is dangerous because it makes it easier for these hackers to do things, to do malicious things. Was the attack on the MGM ransomware? No, the attack on the MGM, well, it's technically ransomware. right? Because it did go and block the systems. But you have to understand when it's an attack of that size, this takes months, right? These guys didn't just come in and like it starts to go from one place to the other. It's a scaling system. We call it lateral moves, where hackers come into one place and they start moving laterally. Um, so yeah, these attacks take forever. Uh, okay, let me see. I think we addressed all the questions, Lisa. So I see you have a poll here. So please, everyone, click on that. There it goes. It went away. Okay. So are there any more questions about the topics that we just went over, more specifically about the type of ransomware attacks from anybody before I move on to the next section? I don't see any more questions. Lisa, do you see any?
I do not.
Okay, fantastic.
There is what is chat GBT question. Sorry about that.
What is, oh yeah, so ChatGPT is an artificial intelligence system. It's an investment from Microsoft. It's a separate company than Microsoft, but they're promoting it quite a bit. What it is we're entering the era of artificial intelligence, meaning we're not just talking and interacting with hardware and software, but it will actually be self-managed. We use ChatGPT for many different functions in our business. I happen to think that it's in its very early stages, but at some point it will probably help you with things like composing an email, or and I know that right now as you type emails, sometimes you see that you can hit enter and just fills in the rest for you. But I'm talking in a whole conversational portion of that email, and or read the email and understand what you're trying to say. We're using ChatGPT quite a bit right now for marketing, and that really helps us a lot in terms of creating content. You need to be careful because these systems are early, are young, and you have to think about it as a brain that is being trained. The best way that these systems work is when you begin to train the systems. In other words, to give you an example, if we were talking about cybersecurity, we will put a lot of documentation about cybersecurity into ChatGPT. So when you ask those questions to ChatGPT, it will have a better understanding of what you're trying to ask. That is what we call training the model. And so over time, I'm just thinking out loud here, but in the insurance business, underwriting questions, things like that might be automated at some point. So, but we're early in that journey, in my opinion. So I hope that answered the question. If you have any, just post them. I'll answer them the best that I can. Excellent. So continuing on. So why are we a target, right? Not every business is as much as a target as the businesses that hold and deal with PII, or personal identifiable information. So when you think of PII and NPA, it's information that is personal or non-public, right? So as you can see on the previous slide, just in 22 alone, there were 236.1 million ransomware attacks globally. And a lot of these were targeted to organizations that they know that that they have a ton of personal identifiable information. So think about Target, Home Depot, they hold your credit card information or your buying history, all these things that they are collecting over time on us, right? So we have to be mindful. one of the things that I will always tell you, be mindful where you share your data. I mean, I know there are things that we just inevitably cannot get away from. And those are things like, the Facebooks, all these things that are constantly collecting our data. But there are things that you can opt out. But because you hold and work with and ask for this kind of information, that's one of the main reasons why you're a target. I ask agencies all the time if they are securing their email when they're communicating with their customers, and a lot of them are moving toward securing emails, securing communications, just to avoid having this information so openly out there. And the truth is that we collect data innocently sometimes, right? I mean, how many of you, raise your hand, how many of you actually send out, signing documents electronically, right? So as we do that, we're collecting information. Like in this example, I'm showing you here that when you send a DocuSign document, there's an IP address associated. So an IP address is a unique address for where that internet is located. So if I'm a hacker and I get into a system that has a ton of DocuSign documents, I now have the address where these customers came from. And if those customers don't have any protection from the internet, I can easily just log in and collect data. So those are the things that we're doing. I mean, it's innocent, but the truth is that we're doing it. So if you have any questions about these things, I'm happy to answer them. But Irma, I see that you said that the audio is bad. Can you guys hear me okay now?
Yes, we're fine. That was very early on in the webinar.
Okay, great. Okay. Now, I don't want you to dismiss the fact, I don't want you to think of these hackers as just regular people. For them is a business, okay? And we need to think about them as a business, right? I saw a documentary, I think it was 60 Minutes or so, that they were chasing these hackers all the way in India. And they went into a building where there were hundreds of them, hundreds. And they were all wearing ties and suits, shirts. They ran it like a call center. And so these are serious things for them. They do this for a living. They're doing this daily. They're practicing daily because they know that all of this information, they can take this information and sell it on the dark web or use it for that matter. I had somebody recently got an email from that appeared to be legitimate, and it was threatening them that they had information on them and video on them and all these things. And I was saying to myself, this is terrible. It's they prey on people who are not knowledgeable how this works. They prey on the fact that we all know that we should be doing better with cybersecurity. And so they understand that. And for them, it's a business, right? When they get this screen and they have locked those screens, for them means money, right? And so and they understand that really well. That they're gonna prey on the weak and all of that. So we're gonna talk about cybersecurity data breach laws, and I could tell you this is one. We do a lot of business outside of New York as well, and this is one of the things that actually is becoming to be a bigger issue outside of New York, outside of Connecticut, outside of this area, because now other states are implementing the same type of laws. In fact, Pennsylvania just passed one. So let's discuss them. As you do business outside of your territories, it's really good to understand how those businesses potentially can be affected by these data breach laws, right? So, and we're gonna take a break in another 15 minutes, Lisa?
Yes, we do have a few more questions that have come in,
Okay.
and
So before I
maybe
do
we
that,
could read the question first so that everybody knows what you're answering?
Sure.
Okay.
Let me just see. Do you
I
want to
threw
read
them
them and
into
I'll
your
answer them?
chat.
Hold on. Okay, let's see. Hold on. So when you share the number of attacks, are these attacks that were successful, or does it include the attempted ones as well? So that's a phenomenal question, by the way, because what is an attempted versus a success? If you think about from the, let's say, the Department of Financial Services, they want you to let them know about even an attempt to breach. And the other thing is, what is an attempt to breach? Because if I had somebody that found me on the internet and they were already breached, they didn't know about it. In their opinion, they were not breached because they didn't have the ransomware, but the hacker was actually in their email systems. So the definition of an attempt and actually being breached, it's kind of a thin line, because they might be in other systems. Just because you haven't gotten a ransomware, or just because you haven't gotten uh, blocked out of your emails or something, doesn't mean that they're not in other type of systems within your organization. So these numbers of attacks are actually successful attacks, by the way, to answer your question. As far as we can tell, how would anyone know? That's actually one of the things that I ask businesses that don't have, and we'll talk about MDR and EDR, which we see more and more in insurance companies' questionnaires. But how would anyone know if there aren't any systems in place to monitor and discover those attempt to breaches? So we'll talk about that after the break. But really, it's a fine line, very fine line. So does that mean DocuSign is not safe? No, DocuSign is probably one of the safest one. That means that where you save those DocuSign, like, there are practices, and I'm going to show you an actual breach in a little bit, or how people get breached. But the thing is, you have to look at your practices, right? So if you're saving the copies of your DocuSigns in an unsecure hard drive, or in a location in your network that is accessible to anybody, it's not DocuSign's fault. Is the fact that we're saving those in a different location. We need to look at the practices on how we're managing data, how we're dealing with data, and especially data that contains personal identifiable information. If you do all communication using the email through systems such as apply systems, are you more protected than using email through Outlook alone? I would say no. I mean, they're both systems, and as a matter of fact, if you are using apply systems email correctly, is more than likely connected to your either Office 365 or email server. And that's done purposely, because if it goes out of another place, it runs the chance of being a spam. So it's more than likely going to be going out of that server anyway. So it's really still using your Office 365 or Google or whatever system you're using. So it's not that it's safer than others. It's going out of the same place. Where I will want you to focus more is, if you're using Outlook, you're more than likely using Office 365 as your email server. I still see some businesses that have in-house email. I think at this point, almost everybody has moved on to either Google or more than likely Office 365, which is Microsoft. But I still see some from time to time. Those are not as many, but that is a big concern, because those servers in-house are easier to breach than, let's say, Microsoft. But what you want to be more focused on will be on perhaps making sure Office 365 is secure. We see that a large percentage, almost half of the breaches that occur that we get called on, are typically within Microsoft Office 365. And usually it's because they don't, whoever set it up or the IT company hasn't been really focused on enabling what's called multi-factor authentication. We'll talk a little bit more about multi-factor, but that's one of the things that we see a lot. We see a lot of breaches on Office 365. So you want to focus on securing that first, then apply it or anything else, because those emails essentially go out of there. I hope that didn't confuse you, but that's how I would think about it. Yeah, so the Microsoft breaches are not being done inside of your single tenant of Office 365. They report thousands of those, but they're not all being done in your. So the way Microsoft Office 365, without getting too techy, works is when you sign up for that, they give you what's called a tenant, meaning it's a login for you, specific server. You're probably together with a lot of people, but all those breaches that they report are not all attempted inside of your tenant. What you are worried is, what you should be more focused on, again, is making sure that your tenant is protected. In other words, your logins. Most of the assessments that I do, typically people have Office 365 wide open, meaning no multi-factor. They leave a lot of accounts that people who either leave the organization or started a new career, those accounts are still available in Office 365. So for that reason, there's got to be a cleanup. There's got to be a process of offloading those users. Lisa, I think that was it, right?
I actually have one more that just came in, Walter, that I'm going to throw into the chat box for you.
Shoot. And if you want, after that, we can take a break before I go into the state laws.
Sure, that's great.
So I'm sorry. Lisa, I have never heard of destroying data before. I heard of legally saving data because you'll need it, but I never heard of destroying. I'm sorry, I wouldn't be able to answer that. I've never been with a regulator or consultant that will even suggest that. I mean, look, you guys are in the business of literally managing chaos, right? Just like other businesses. And in my opinion, how can you defend the case of I don't know, a policy, an insured, or a fire, or whatever the lawsuit is, if you are unable to produce proof of the policies that you did for those companies, or emails where the customer said, no, I don't want the umbrella for this specific coverage, thank you, and then they had a loss. So I will say that I never heard of that, Lisa, before, so I couldn't really comment on that. We're big on saving everything, meaning emails, for example, perpetually. You never know when you're gonna need an email, and certain data. I mean, I never heard of that before.
So let me just read the question, because I had a few people chat in wondering what the question was. Some cybersecurity insurers and consultants/regulators require destroying old data after 3 years, but that puts insurance brokers and agents at risk of not being able to document E&O claims using past data. Please explain the weight of each for protecting agency security, business continuity, and protection against lawsuits. This seems like a trade-off and difficult for a cybersecurity expert to assess.
Yeah, and like I said, I never heard of. We wouldn't advise people to delete data for many reasons. I mean, even from an audit perspective, I don't even know how you will answer that. But there's many ways to safely safeguard that data, as well as protecting that information. there really isn't an issue with that. So I don't know anyone that will recommend that. And then I see another question. It says Office 365 has the keep login. Is that a security problem? I guess that probably means that keeps asking you to log in. Not sure if that was the question, Lisa. If it keeps prompting you to log in, is that a problem? Uh, it really depends where you're logging in from. I will say that if you're working at home or in your office, that there are ways to set up multi-factor authentication to recognize that that is you and that you're logging in from a safe location. So it's not going to prompt you every 5 minutes to do that. But I will have to understand a little bit more about that case to kind of advise you on that. New York law requires that you maintain personal lines files for 3 years and commercial lines file for 7. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. That I just don't know who will delete that. And you can absolutely. It says here that you can store files in a protected file, and that's one of the line items in the cybersecurity law, by the way, to encrypt your hard drives. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about that after the break. So, I think Lisa, this might be a good time. I don't see any more questions right now.
Yep, perfect. So let's take a 10-minute break. Please be back at 1:56.
Okay, Sue, you let me know when you want me to continue.
At 1:56, we can continue because I asked everybody to be
Cool,
back at 1:56.
no problem.
And we don't have any new questions, so you can just start anew. Your slides are not showing, however.
Okay,
There you go.
cool.
All right, we're good.
Thank you.
You can start whenever you're ready, Walter.
Okay, awesome. Welcome back, everybody. So just want to kind of give you a quick recap of what we talked about. So remember the forms of breaches. The number one is phishing. Those emails that we're constantly getting. I don't know if you get probably a bunch of these coming in and you just don't know which one. And I'll help you just determine in a little bit which ones are legitimate or not. Then you have business email compromise, or BEC. And they come in the form of pretending to be someone who either is your CEO or somebody in the organization. Ransomware attacks, which are pretty common, and then zero-day flaws. Okay, and of course our friends with AI and machine learning. So then the reason why you are a target is because you're collecting personal identifiable information. Okay, just a quick recap on what we discussed. So let's talk about different states, different laws, different things, and I'll focus more on the insurance business, but I want you to also think about what are some of the businesses you serve currently, you do business with, and can you potentially sell them different type of insurance because their data laws actually require it, right? So in the United States, data breach laws are mainly regulated at the state level. All 50 states, the District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands have implemented legislation requiring private or government entities to secure breaches, especially when it comes to personal identifiable information. However, each state, the specifics can vary from everyone, and it could become a little more complex as you look at it. So, of course, you all know the NAIC, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. They do have a data law model. I think like any of these data law models, it's again, each state may have their own, and they implement it differently. It's worth noting that while the NAIC model law serve as a template, it's up to individual states to adopt it, right? So when you think about all these states, um, they use, by the way, the New York State Department of Financial Services is it's a baseline and a framework for a lot of these regulations. As we study them and we see them, they're very similar. They kind of take a page from it and do their own spin on it. But really, DFS is phenomenal when it comes to those standards. And this applies to insurance and to the insurance industry. This year, PA adopted a new law, a new cybersecurity regulation, very similar to DFS, and so it's already in place, signed as a law. So if you have any questions on these things, just please post them on the chat. I'll try to answer what I know about it so far. But feel free to ask questions on the chat. Okay. Are there any questions about this, the NAIC data models, data security models? And of course, we have this is just an example of the New York Department of Financial Services cybersecurity regulation, right? What we know as the NYCRR Part 500. And there's a lot of changes happening to this, so we'll see them in the next few months. But this is a template for a lot of these regulations: multi-factor authentication, encryption, training employees, all these things. We'll go deep into them right now, but there was a massive, in my opinion, massive misunderstanding of how this worked when it was implemented in 2019. A lot of people thought they were exempt, but there isn't really a full exemption. It was just a limited exemption. You still had to do a few things to be in compliance. So again, this is a framework. I come across hundreds of businesses that either deny themselves from wanting to be in compliance, or they just don't want to think about it. But I also talk to them about what is the right thing to do when it comes to your business, to your customers, because in the end, your customers' information is what you're protecting. So if an investment needs to be made to do that, that's the decision you'll have to make. But it is your customer base. You know, I tend to think that complacency is something that it just kind of takes a lot of businesses by surprise. This is Andrew Grove. For those of you that are like me, a little older, you probably grew up in the era of when computers started, and you probably saw a lot of the commercials on TV that said Intel inside, meaning that there was a microchip on every computer made by Intel. During his tenure, Andrew was paranoid. He ran that company like crazy. He was never complacent. As a result, they thrived and they did amazing. Today, companies like Apple are making their own microchips. Google, TensorFlow, almost every company today is making their own microprocessors, which means that Intel is not doing too well, even though they own the majority of the market. The same thing could be said about BlackBerry. For those of you who have not seen the movie BlackBerry and you're like me, older, you will enjoy it. It's a lot of fun to watch how they miss the opportunity. And so being paranoid is not a bad thing, in my opinion. Again, I don't want you from this presentation to say, oh my God, I'm doing terrible. I want you just to think about what are the things you can implement from this idea, right? And what can you do now? What can you do tomorrow and in the future? And we'll talk about, a little bit about solutions toward the end, and I'll give you some pointers of some things that you can do. But I just want you to think that if you are complacent, just verify that things are the way they are supposed to be. Almost 9 out of 10 cybersecurity assessments I do come back with basically the possibility of being breached is 100%. So just be a little paranoid, okay? Are there any questions before I continue, Sue, or we're good?
Nope, we did get a few questions in. The first one, insurance companies and insurance agencies are using off-site help from foreign countries. How are they able to do that and still comply with states' cybersecurity laws?
By the way, I just want to make a disclaimer. I did not pay this person to ask this question, but it is a phenomenal question. So I spent a lot of time on this, by the way. I'm a little obsessive. So I had a customer that sent me the proposal. I'm not going to mention the name of the company, but it was a company that does that is doing outside help for insurance agencies in a form of, I guess, clerical work or something. But I actually read the entire 50-page document. And Megan from my team was the one that went really deep into the rabbit hole of reading the contract. And I don't think our customer had read the contract, because as he went along, as I went along understanding it, there was even a clause in the contract that this company is allowed to be breached once a month, and they signed it. And I'm saying to myself, wait a minute, who will sign a document where a company who, by the way, is a third party of a third party company providing the service? Because when we look deep into it, it was the outsourcing company is in another country. The company who's selling that service to you is probably in the United States. So they are outsourcing, meaning transferring the liability to another third party. And then we looked deeply into how they protect the systems, and there was zero protection. There was no multi-factor authentication, which in cases like in New York, you're literally violating the law. There was no email protection. And by the way, that line, you know, that line where you're you're an agent or not, is very blurry, because they were doing some clerical work that wasn't, in my opinion, supposed to be done. So to answer that question, you really have to do your due diligence with that, because they are who's responsible for that is essentially you. And if these companies aren't protecting you or protecting your customers' data that way, you need to demand that, or maybe have them do it the way you're doing it. So it's very dangerous, in my opinion. There are ways to protect that, and there are ways to securely have these companies work remotely. They have to authenticate through a process that you have defined that doesn't violate the law, and I think there's a very good opportunity there to have that conversation. So Sue, I hope that answered the question. Were there any more?
One other question, and that actually another one came in. Do you usually delete the phishing email or block them?
If you're in the new Outlook version, or you're using the Outlook web version, there is an option to report to junk or phishing. And if you do that, you're actually helping everybody else, because if you report it as phishing, it will be flagged at the Microsoft level. And the more people, it's kind of like that traffic on Google Maps. When you see traffic, it's because people have reported it. Or cars are getting slower around the time. So the algorithms will tell Microsoft that this is a bad email. So I would recommend you doing that. If you're not using the modern Outlook, just delete it and empty your deleted items. Okay. Was there another one, Sue?
Actually, it was just a comment, and it's under the cyber regulation laws. We need to have the security procedures and have sign off on the accepted form, I think. It is not required under the limited exception, but it is a good practice. So maybe she means exception form.
Gotcha.
So just a comment.
Yeah. Yeah, so as we can tell, being paranoid is not a bad thing. If you guys need me to look at your contracts with those third-party companies, I'm going to provide my information at the end. I'll be more than happy to do so. But I've yet to see one. I have had a couple of fights with some of them. The truth of the matter is that these companies believe that they are in the business of providing a clerical service. In my opinion, they have to first be in the business of cybersecurity if they're providing that service, and make sure that they protect those systems, people, from breaching, or maybe even especially because some of them work from home too. A lot of them work from home, and we don't know what computers they're using at their house. So, okay, so a little paranoid, not bad. And again, just printing some forms is not cybersecurity compliance, right? I mean, there was this company here on Long Island, First American. I think most of you have heard of them, right? They were one of the first ones to get fined by DFS. And so, but it's not just the fine. It's not just the money, right? The 7 million, whatever it was, I forgot how much it was. But it's the reputational damage after that, right? Beyond the money, it's the long-term reputation, the trust, rebuilding that business. You spent 30 years building this business, and then all of a sudden one of these things happen, and you have to report it to everybody. So, not to mention the operational disruption, right? The investigations. I mean, and by the way, I also do business with some mortgage companies, and because they're part of DFS, and I got to tell you, it's incredible to me how aggressive these investigations can be. So just be mindful of that, and of course, the legal and the cost ramifications of this, right? So that's really what happens during a data breach. And I get a lot of this thing, right? People tell me, "Look, Walter, I don't really care. I'm too small. Who's gonna breach me, Walter? Who's looking for me?" It's not like that, right? It's not that hackers are looking specifically for you. You're just a random target, and if you happen to bite, it's like fishing, literally. Uh, they'll get you, right? So that's really how I want you to think about that. Everyone needs to be protected, regardless of the size, regardless of the type of business. And so here's Dora again. Uh, we're gonna talk about a couple of things. The first one is, what does PII stand for? Where can stolen data like credit card info find its way? Number three, how do states play a role in cybersecurity? And when data gets compromised, what's an often underestimated repercussion of that? Which statement rings true about cybersecurity laws? So I'll give you guys a couple of minutes here, Sue. While that's happening, any questions at all that came in?
Nope, no more questions.
Okay, we're getting tired now.
Okay, here's a question while people are answering.
Sure.
Is BEC also social engineering fraud?
100%. 100%. Because it's. By the way, I'll tell you a quick story. I can't tell you the name of the organization, but I'll tell you a quick story. So, and they found us online, so they called me, and it was after the fact. But this particular person, and you know, when you think about these hackers, they're learning your industry more and more every day. And so they chose a Friday, a holiday on a Friday, and they were in this particular company's email system for probably over a month. And what the hackers do now, unlike back in the 90s where people would just get all these emails, what they do now is they stay in there, they don't make a noise, right? They just look at the traffic, they start to read your emails, they understand the business more today. So this particular lady was the one that made the wire transfers of all the accounts bound for the week. And she will get this one email every Friday from this particular insurance company that this is what you need to transfer at the end of the day. And that particular Friday, she got that email, but it wasn't from the insurance company. It was from a hacker. So they said, by the way, it looked like the person. It looked like it actually had a copy of the invoices for all the accounts. It looked legit. And so on the bottom of it, they said, by the way, this is a new routing number. Please send it here. And she did, $90,000. And that happens a lot. And by a lot, I mean daily almost. I get phone calls from people, and I'll show you in a little bit. Frantic calls, Sunday texts at 3 in the morning. I mean, it's wild what's going on, and it's because these hackers are starting to learn more about our businesses, and that's dangerous. So, all right, let's see how well you guys did with Dora the Explorer.
Hey, Walter, one question, and
yeah.
it's mine. What does BEC stand for?
All right, I love it. I love these questions, by the way. I'm gonna go back to that slide, but I just want to answer the Dora question. Did everybody get it right? Just raise your hand if you got it all right. Cool. All right. So it's business email compromise, right? It's when um, someone is pretending to be somebody of power, like a CEO or somebody. It will typically look like this to where did it go? It will look like this. I had a story about a person
Yeah.
that it was in an island on a vacation, and the hacker knew because they read his email, his out of the office reply, and the office manager sent them money.
Got it.
So yeah, okay. Let me go back to Dora. Yeah, so they know where to sell this information, right? By the way, please post your questions on the chat. If you have any questions about how to where this information goes or how they sell it, please let me know. Just feel free to post them, and we'll go along with Sue. But is the false sense of security, right? The complacency that we talked about, assuming that these measures are not good enough, right? The overestimation of preparedness. So I get called in sometimes when it's too late, right? The thing already happened. And the first thing I realized is that this company was pretty much had this idea. My IT guy was doing it. My guy does it. There's a big misconception in my industry, and I just want to clarify that for you, not for me, but more for you about, you know, this misconception of my IT guy is or my IT company is helping me with this. I gotta be honest with you. I've been in the industry, like I said, for 25 years. I started as just doing basic IT services, fixing computers, that kind of thing. But this business has evolved tremendously. I mean, if you're expecting your IT company that fixes your computers and maybe troubleshoots your problems daily to be an expert in compliance and cybersecurity, that might be a problem down the line for you because it's a whole different skill set, right? So I always ask people, when was the last time you asked your IT provider if you will survive a ransomware attack? And mind you, this is a question you could ask your customers to ask to their IT providers when they're asking you for cyber insurance, right? Because you're gonna have that form that you need from the insurance company. You're gonna give it to your customer. Your customer is gonna hand it down to the guy that just gonna complete whatever they can. There's probably some stuff that the IT company's missing anyway, so they're not gonna fill that in, right? They're not gonna implicate themselves. So and it goes on and on and on. So you're submitting a form that they don't even know what they just filled out. And that's what we see a ton of it, right? So a good question is always the same. When was the last time you had a cybersecurity risk assessment, and what did that assessment show? Were the things that you needed to do in order to protect your customers' data? And don't assume that your IT guy is doing it. That's a big misconception. It's a very different company. It's a very different business. Any questions came in, Sue?
Yes, sir. There is one question about about a cyber policy, which I'm not sure if you'd want to answer it if it's your area of expertise. And then the second question is MFA costly and difficult to implement?
MFA costly? No. Difficult to implement? Depends. I wouldn't consider it difficult, whomever asked that question. What I will consider is for all these things, I don't want you to take the approach of doing one thing and that's it. I want you to take a holistic approach about the whole thing because you may have multi-factor enabled, but your hard drive isn't encrypted or your password is out of, you have to be able to look at this as a holistic approach of what are the things I need to pay attention to, right? One of the things I get a lot is I'm on the cloud, Walter, my AMS, my applied systems, we're good, man. I don't need you. I'm about to show you a live hack of an AMS system. I picked AMS because it could be anybody, but you know, it's not just the multi-factor that I want you to take away from this conversation. I want you to think about the holistic approach of every little piece that can potentially look. You're in the insurance business, right? So it's like writing a policy for a restaurant, right? You're gonna look at the space, the size, the fire, the extinguisher, all these pieces that if you leave something out, it could potentially be an issue down the line, right? So that's the same way you need to look at your business. That's how we look at it. So I'm gonna switch to my other ear. Hold on. Yeah. What was the other question again?
Okay, so there's actually a few more that have come in.
Shoot.
Can you comment on the recent MGM attack?
The only thing I can tell you is that it's no different than almost every attack we see. There's some sort of engineering happening, social engineering. There was somebody who called the help desk with all credentials, and this happens a lot, by the way. I actually think the largest component of any of these breaches is what we call social engineering. And what social engineering really is utilizing the human as a method to get into this. So I'll give you an example. Another insurance agency out in Staten Island, we kept getting this call into the help desk, and the person was getting really angry at us because they couldn't open a Word document. And so we called them up and we said, what's going on? And they were like, oh, one of our customers sent us an email with an invoice and we can't open it. Now, you would think that if somebody calls you to say, look, I've got to pay this invoice, that you will want to open it right away, right? That's just logical. But it was actually a hacker. It was never a customer. It was a hacker that was sending an attachment through that invoice. And every time the office manager was opening that invoice, our antivirus, which is something we call next generation antivirus, was blocking it immediately because it was a ransomware. So that's how social engineering works. And so when you look at the target breach, that's exactly what happened. So that's to the extent that I will comment on that. But most of the times it's just an interaction with somebody and you just clicked on that thing and it was over. Anything else, Sue?
Yep, there's a bunch. How do you feel about having a cloud assessment?
I think you should have a cloud assessment all the time. I mean, I'm gonna educate all of you guys a little bit more on what something we call MDR and EDR, which you're gonna start seeing a lot of these acronyms in insurance companies are asking for this kind of thing, and I'll show you what that is. But those systems monitor the clouds and monitor the computers, what we call the endpoints, where the users connect them from. So I think you should do that all the time, once a year at least.
Okay, next question. Are there still cyber carriers that will allow you to run free risk assessments for your clients? If so, which ones?
Well, I got great news for you guys because we're going to talk about that at the end of this presentation. I will hold off on that because that's one of the things I want to talk to you about, which is empowering you guys to be able to do these assessments for your customers. And I'll show you how we partner with some agencies and how you can take advantage of that, okay?
Okay. The next one is, are fake emails, cyber attacks more common than successful telephone scams?
Yes, I would say yes. There's still a large portion of. See, the thing you have to remember is that those emails that you get that you may think are just not legitimate phishing emails, some of them are actually legitimate. Some of them are someone got into that real Office 365 and they started sending out emails to the list in there. Until, like I said before, report it, always report it so that you help. Until a lot of people report it, that can continue on for a while. So, but I would say yes.
Okay. Next, how much can someone depend on the credit monitoring services that are offered by a company that has had a breach?
That's a good question. Who was I thinking about today that actually had a breach? Well, look, we trust companies that have breaches all the time. I mean, you haven't stopped shopping at Target because they had a breach. You haven't stopped using Facebook because they get breached every other day. Um, if you're on LinkedIn right now, LinkedIn got breached 4 years ago, and it actually was a really bad breach because it ended up putting all of our stuff on the dark web. Um, and the hacker actually dumped it. They didn't even want money for it. It was one of those like guys that just wanted his name out there. But look, these days, I'm very careful. I know I am a target. I know you are a target because you own businesses. So there's always someone trying to get in. So there are things that I don't have access to even in my own business because I just know that I'm more of a target. If you are one of those business owners or the president of the company, especially more if you're a public figure or you speak a lot about these topics, I will say that some of these systems you don't want to trust, right? Um, but there are some great practices that you can follow. I tend to use multi-factor authentication in anything that I can. The other day, just 2 days ago, I was getting a text from my GoDaddy account that my password was being rejected. And I'm like, I'm not logging into GoDaddy right now. But because I have enabled multi-factor authentication, which we'll talk about in a little bit, um, they can try as much as they want. They couldn't get in. So I think there are some good practices you could do, and we'll talk about those as well. Password managers. What is your opinion in regards to password managers like LastPass or Google Password Manager? Is it safe? I would say safer than having it on a spreadsheet. You will be surprised how many times I walk into businesses and I say, "So how do you keep your passwords?" And they show me this one spreadsheet that everybody has access to. Uh, and again, all these systems are only as good as how you protect them, how you think about them. So, for example, if I'm using a password manager, whether it's LastPass or any of those, I will always enable multi-factor. And today, when we talk about multi-factor, we talk about an actual application on your mobile device that will be able to set up those multi-factors. I don't know if you guys can see my phone there, but I'm using Microsoft Duo, which is one of the ones we use in our business. But you add multi-factors in there, and it's inside of an application. It's not a text. So it's safer than that. In fact, DFS does not want you to have text or multi-factor. So, and the reason is because it could be replicated. It could be actually what's called spoofing, getting the text to another mobile device. Anything else, Sue, that you see there?
One more just came in. Is Google Password Manager safer than a password protected Excel spreadsheet?
If you compare the two of them, yes, because on the Google Password Manager, you can enable multi-factor. In fact, Google went a step further. There's something that you'll see over and over in the future, which are these. It's like a USB key. I may have one here actually. Yeah, I wasn't prepared to show you one, but we use them. They're called YubiKeys. Yeah, mine is not with me. But what it is this tiny little USB keys that obviously is with you all the time, right? So it's like a key. So when it prompts you for a password, you can put that key. But Google can still do the Google multi-factor. They have Google Authenticator is the multi-factor for Google. So you can set up your multi-factors on your Google account. And it's great because it's not a text, right? So it is safer than a password. A password, I just want you guys to know, a password, and again, if it's super complex, a password will take longer. But if you have a password with like 10 characters, that will take a hacker like 5 minutes to breach. And as a matter of fact, let's go over that real quick. So this is my friend Kyle. Kyle used to be in the intelligence community, by the way. He was a National Guard cyber warfare operator, and he went on to invent the product that is called EDR, which is an acronym for detection and response. And I'm going to show you a breach of applied systems here. So this is how breaches happen. This is an Indeed job posting. This is a producer. This is actually a real post from somebody. And they were looking for a producer. They posted it on Indeed. And of course, the hacker applied, right? So they uploaded a resume. This company was actually waiting for this resume. So the hacker will put a note, hey, I'm a producer, see my resume, right? And here it goes. So, and anybody could do this because that's an open system, right? So here's Karen in the office. And of course, they're waiting for these resumes, right? And here's the resume. Now, it looks like a legitimate email from Indeed. But when Karen tries to open that email, that attachment, she's going to get error messages. She's going to get this secure thing. You guys have seen this before. Hackers are really good at knowing that you deal with secure documents. So they're going to fake you into thinking that this is secure, right? So you're like, oh yeah, this is secure. Let me click it. So what Karen just did by enabling this content and opening this up, and she gets an error. By the way, hackers know that when you get an error message, you may forward this to someone else, right? So here's Karen forwarding it to someone else. But what really happened here is as soon as she did that, a keylogger was installed in her computer. No administrator rights, like back in the day we needed to install and have a password for it. No access rights needed. Everything Karen does from here on is being looked at by a hacker on the other side of the world. There was zero interaction. And here's Karen logging into AMS, right? So, and by the way, she's using the secure site for AMS, which is kind of funny because it's a URL like regular. So here's the hacker, and everything she types. And by the way, these tools are so easy to get for them. These are the ones that I was talking to you before, where you can just go on ChatGPT or some of these websites and create these things. So here's what we call a sniffer or a keylogger, and it's logging everything. I mean, even pictures. Like you can take a screenshot of Karen's desktop, and it will be saved on the hacker's computer, and the hacker can see even what Karen is looking at. That's how crazy this is, and they didn't have to install anything. But the crazy thing is that they also see everything you type. So passwords, URLs, everything, right? And like I said before, they don't really need to have a lot of knowledge of computing because these systems even have help systems. Like they can ask for help in the hacking tool, right? But look, here's the portion of that email that she typed. So is logging everything that she's typing. And it also found that there was a URL, and again, hackers know your business by now. So here's the URL, and the hacker just went to that same URL. And because he has the password and the username, he's able to log in to AMS. And here's the hacker going after the whole book of business. They can download it, spreadsheet, ask you for money, maybe even lock you out of the accounts, which happened to somebody I know. They got locked out of their own AMS system. So I'm sure there's a lot of questions on this one, Sue.
Okay. Does this also involve headhunters for positions? Because I've had some questionable interactions with them.
I don't trust anybody. I mean, unless you know the person, it could be a social engineering gig, right? Where, they might be just sending you breaches.
We do have a comment that says, but AMS has to email you a 6-digit code.
It depends. AMS also has a multi-factor that I rarely see turned on. And they use an app that is actually the worst rated app in the App Store for multi-factor. I think Apply Systems is winning that battle, by the way, in my personal opinion, because they said, look, we're not gonna go and build a super secure system for this. We're just gonna let people, the ones that know how this works, connect it to multi-factor like Duo or Microsoft Authenticator. And that's a more robust way to look at it, because they're basically moving their multi-factor to someone else, which to me, is better, right? It's better for you as a consumer, because you're not going to compare Cisco Duo to a company that makes agency management software. They're focused more on the agency management software than the security stuff. So I'll say that that's a good move from Applied. I think AMS starting to do that as well. But again, it's all about understanding how the holistic approach works, because somebody will say, oh, I have multi-factor to my computer, but they don't have it to the AMS, or they don't have it to their Office 365, or they don't have it for something else. And or all the websites that you visit for some insurance companies that may not even allow you to do multi-factor yet, which we see quite a bit too. So
next, how do you suggest the resume situation be handled? Request the applicant supply a resume that isn't protected?
Yeah, and by the way, this is where I go back to what is the strategy of the business in terms of when and if you get a document like that, right? I can only tell you that in the case of our customers, even if they got that document, our MDR will detect that there's something in the system, and we're gonna block it, and it's in real time. So it's not you cannot tell customers or whoever you do business with not to send you stuff, because that stops the business from being productive, right? However, you have to think about, like, how am I protecting the agency from those potential breaches that are going to occur regardless? And I think about cybersecurity all the time as layers, right? There's this thing. If this thing fails, there's this thing. If this thing fails, there's this other thing. And so, and we'll talk about them. I'm actually going to go over that.
A common agency management system is QQ Catalyst. Are there any risks to be aware of there?
There are risks with every system. It's not one specific, right? And the risks come in a form of how we're looking at that. If you're very diligent, if your IT company or whoever is your provider is so diligent at securing these systems, you can be on AMS and it's secure. But more and more we see people that are not very diligent about these things, the more complacent, and there's that false sense of security, right? It's like this slide. Should we open the attachment, right? So it's not just one product. It's not a product-based thing. I don't want you guys to think that we're trashing on AMS. We took AMS as an example, but there are people who are securing AMS properly. It's just a matter of knowing how and when and making sure that it is correct. I hope that answered the question.
And one more question for now is to confirm, you are saying we shouldn't forward emails like this to our IT department for tracking, correct? I usually forward these to our IT department so he can be aware of it and warn others.
I'm going to educate you a little more further down about how to look at these emails. you probably forward these in the hope of what? They're going to magically make it disappear, or you just don't know. Because if you look at the law, and this is where we get deep into like what you should be doing, right? Because if you look at the regulation from DFS or anyone, it says that there should be some employee training. Therefore, on that training, it teaches you how to look at the recipient, the destination, the attachments, and all of that. And if you're able to see that, then you should say to yourself, okay, this is not a legitimate email. Within Outlook, you can say phishing and report it, which is probably what your IT department is doing anyway. They're not fixing anything. Um, they're gonna look at it, but I just don't know what they will do with it, right? Like we get hundreds of these emails, and then yeah, you have to tweak systems and make sure that they're updated, that they're not getting these spams and stuff like that. Maybe the spam ratio goes up and you tighten up a little bit, but then you run the risk of legitimate emails getting caught on that spam. So it's a battle there. The answer to the question should be, what is the process stipulated in my cybersecurity policy to follow when and if I get these emails?
We did get a few more questions in, Walter.
Shoot.
Will setting up an old-fashioned email off the network be useful in protecting the network and customer information, such as make-believe-insurance@aol.com and have all resumes sent there?
No. Look, I don't know who's posting this question about the resumes, and I feel your pain because there's so much misinformation. However, the way you have to think about your systems is whether it's the resumes or your customer's application or maybe your kid's school project, you are gonna need to be able to get attachments and Word documents and Excel spreadsheets via email. The idea here will be that those emails and things are one, properly being monitored in the sense of spam filters. Microsoft Office 365 is what you, if you're using that, they have something called advanced threat protection, which as enable, it's a little bit more money than your regular license, but when you enable that, your protection goes through the roof, right? Much better protection. And then if you did get one, which the probabilities are that you're one day gonna get one. I mean, it's gonna happen. It's just when. That you have systems in those computers that will not only determine that you have a breach, but also can stop it in real time. And that's what we're gonna talk about in the next few slides. But AOL accounts, run from them. They're easy to breach. I wouldn't use that. No.
Okay, in that example, is the hack only complete when you enable, or does it work just because you opened the attachment?
It's just by opening it.
Um,
In some cases, it could be just by opening it. In some cases, you have to click enable. It depends on how they built that code. Again, code's getting better, faster. We're in the era of AI, so expect things to be much more aggressive. In this particular example I show you, yes, it was when they clicked enabled. Just to be clear.
okay. I'm going to hold on the questions for a little bit just so that you can get through some more material.
Fantastic. And I think we're doing really good with time. Okay. So that was pretty scary, right? The breach. And if you're from New York and you're from Long Island, you more than likely heard about Suffolk County cyber attack that literally had us without even being able to buy a house for almost 2 months or issue titles. I posted this text from a customer. It wasn't our customer that got breached. And this is another thing I want you to think about. That is not always going to be that you're being breached, right? It could be somebody that you do business with. This is a very large firm that their CPA, who happens to come once a week into their office, had a complete breach in their networks. About 2 weeks prior to this, when that laptop came into our network, we detected that it was an issue with it. We notified their IT department 2 weeks prior to this, but they never took action. And that's that complacency that I talk about, right? That's the complacency that a lot of these IT companies just don't take action on it. So, but needless to say, my customer sent me this at 5:30 a.m. She's driving to the office thinking that her bank accounts are empty, but we did not get breached. But that happens all the time, right? So we got to make a shift. That's really the idea here. There's a new era. There's a new time. You got to make a shift from the outdated stuff, right? And look at this not as something that, oh my God, this is terrible. I'm gonna get bruised. No, it's something where you need to take action on some of these items, right? So you got to strengthen your proof of compliance. You have to work really, really hard at that. We got to work on next generation multi-factor. Uh, we're going to talk about managed detection and response after the break. I think that's where you guys are going to get a lot of value out of this conversation, because you are already seeing in your cyber insurance applications acronyms like EDR and MDR. So I'm going to go through that with you so that you know what that means and how to help your customers. And of course, what we used to call antiviruses, we call them now enhanced endpoint security. So, and this idea of zero trust model, I want to introduce you to that concept, because that's really where you can protect yourselves quite a bit. And these are things that you're gonna have to become versed at it, because if you're selling cybersecurity policies, these questions will be on those forms. So here's Dora the Explorer again, and we'll take a break after that. But I want you to tell me which concept revolves around never trust, always verify. Just because you have IT support. In the showcase video number 3, how did the hacker sneak into a system? Number 4, what's expected of a cyber compliance in 2024? Which of the following is not a modern cybersecurity approach or tool? I'm gonna pause here, Sue, so that we have time to answer these questions, and then we can come back from the break. Is that cool?
Yeah, that's cool. So how about everyone come back at 3 o'clock?
Awesome.
Welcome back, Walter.
All right,
We're in the home stretch.
let's do it. We're some great information coming up now. Okay, let's see how well we did with Dora the Explorer. And here's the answers. So A, C, B, and D. So hopefully you got that right. And Sue, just real quick, I see some questions coming in. Do you mind?
Sure. We use DUO with AMS. Is that safer?
Do you use what?
DUO.
Oh, Duo. Yes, yes, that is safer. Yeah.
What
I'll
are your
just see how
thoughts
it's
on?
configured.
Oops, sorry, I don't know all the techie
Yeah, no,
language
it's
I'm learning
safer.
from.
No problem.
What are your thoughts on Dropbox? We use Dropbox to share files with customers.
To whoever put that question, do you already have Office 365? And if you don't, then yeah, Dropbox is fine. But if you already have Office 365, I like it when people consolidate their data in one place, because then you don't have two places to have to worry about, right? So Office 365, if you have email through them, you also get what's called SharePoint and OneDrive. OneDrive is for the personal side, SharePoint is more for the business side. So I would recommend you to look into that, because then you have to only secure one system, not two. But I don't have any issues with Dropbox as long as you enable multi-factor and backups. Oh, one more. I'm sorry, Sue. One more thing. You have to remember that these systems have no backups. Okay, there's a big misconception when it comes to Office 365 that as soon as you go to the cloud, there's no backups. Microsoft has no backup. They have retention policies, which is different than backups. But if you run out of space, they'll wipe you out. So be careful with that, because like we said before, there are some laws about backups and things like that, and how long you have to keep data. So just be mindful that Microsoft, Google, none of them have backups.
Okay, I think I'm going to stop the questions for now. And then maybe we can hit a couple more later.
Awesome.
Okay, cool.
So the next concepts that I'm going to introduce you to, I'd like you to write them down. These are going to be things that will help you in your business long term, because these are things that are going to be, in my opinion, a part of an everyday thing. So what the heck is an MDR? And you're also going to hear another acronym called EDR. And so what MDR stands for is Managed Detection and Response. It's basically a 24/7 monitoring system that monitors the cloud, monitors your computer, and any activity that happens within your systems. That is what essentially an MDR. Beyond traditional security, I want you to think about these measures on preventing breaches before they occur, right? So MDR emphasizes in a continuous monitoring, detection anomalies, and respond to those threats. It's a proactive approach, and how it really works is in real-time monitoring. MDR provides 24/7 to all the digital assets. So advanced tools and expert teams continuously monitor this. Will they call us at 2 in the morning that something is happening in the system and that it's been already contained, and then we take action to do the rest of the thing. So it's a very quick response. I can tell you that without an MDR, there's really no way that any company can monitor systems and say that you're protected. If that's a good question to ask your IT provider, do you have an MDR or an EDR that's monitoring my systems? Because if you don't have that, there's absolutely no way that they will know. And that happens a lot, by the way, when I do these assessments. that I'll go into these systems, and the first question I asked the owners of those agencies, I asked them, did your IT company call you to tell you that there was somebody snooping around? And they usually say no. And that's how I know that they don't have it, because if it was a hacker, right, this is what happens. Just go right through it. So that's really what an MDR is, right? So learns all the time about certain behaviors and patterns. It has a holistic approach of all of the systems you're using, email, AML, everything. And there's also, and we'll talk about application control in a few minutes. Okay, so that's essentially what MDR is. It's a continuous peace of mind with very quick responses, cost effective, is regulatory compliant, right? It has a 24 monitoring, and the way you really have to think about it is like it's a cyber liability policy for your clients, right? But recommending MDR to your clients too, and I'll show you in a little bit how we do that too. There's fewer payouts, and this is where I see some of the competition coming in, because the companies that are providing MDRs or EDRs, those companies are now getting into the cybersecurity business and cyber liability, cybersecurity, cyber policies, all of that business they're getting into. You catch that? Smart Cuban. Did you catch that, right? That there is a threat. If you sell cyber insurance, potentially these companies are coming in to also sell it, and they have this pitch that, look, you get this MDR, you better protect it, right? So insurance companies like that. By integrating MDR requirements, it's a better liability insurance and policy for your customers. Digital risk goes down, and if you require MDR for some of those policies, one would argue there will be a lot less claims. And it positions you as that trusted authority that knows what they're talking about. So one way that I will approach this will be to talk about what are some of those issues that they currently have with their IT provider, or how are they protecting you? Do you have MDR? Like this, these are some of the preliminary questions you could ask to your customers, right? So there will be one more Dora, by the way. So I just want people to kind of get this MDR concept, because we seeing it more and more in questionnaires from the insurance companies. So I just want to drill this information a little bit more.
Oh, absolutely.
So the acronym MDR stands for, which are the primary functions of an MDR? Number 3, despite its automated capabilities, how does MDR ensure precise threat protection? Number 4, how does MDR differ from traditional security measures? Number 5, in the event of a cyber breach, how does MDR prioritize actions? And this is these are the answers. So number 1, manage detection and response. That's something you have to remember, because you'll see it more and more. Which of the following is a primary function of MDR? Is detecting and responding to threats. So that's a big difference between, let's say, an antivirus, right? I get people to tell me, no, I have Norton, Walter. Well, Norton, it's old, right? Norton wouldn't even know what these new threats are. So detecting those, responding in real time, and capturing it and not let it spread and do more damage is really what MDR stands for. And it's because it combines not just that software and monitoring and all that stuff, but it's actually a person that jumps into that issue and locks it down. We see a lot of hacking happening, and before it gets too crazy, it's mitigated and it's proactive, right? So isolates the issues and all of that. It's an incredible system. Ask your IT provider if you have an MDR or an EDR, and you'll know if you're better protected or not. So should we ask some questions about this MDR stuff now, or you want me to continue? And
How are you doing on covering all the material that you want to cover? Pretty good?
I'm pretty. Yeah, we probably should continue. We'll leave it at the end.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So make some notes, guys, about MDR. We'll talk a little bit more. Ask any questions you want about it. I'll answer what I can. Because the way I think about it is that you guys leave a lot of money on the table, right? This is a big business. And that's why these companies, even though they make software, are getting into this business because they say, look, there's a lot of money there. So if you're not selling cyber liability policies to clients, then you're leaving a lot of this money on the table. Most agencies we speak with are not selling cyber liability policies. Oh, they're selling it like as a thing, like on the side. It's not a focus, and I actually think it's because they don't have someone like us that can tell them what these new trends, things like that is. But there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there. You know, there's a lot of these companies that are in the financial industry or that handle PII that are your customers. In the state of New York, we have laws like New York Shield Act. I mean, the attorneys, accountants, all these people have to have these things. So it's an untapped market, and they may not even be aware because you don't talk about it. You don't promote it, right? So beyond traditional policies, this could be a great asset for you, a value proposition, so to speak. Because by selling cyber liability policies, you're not just adding another product to your portfolio, you're becoming that trusted advisor, solution. You're providing a solution to your customers, and one that is becoming a bigger deal for them day after day. If you don't sell it, somebody else will sell it. So the way you can incentivize this thing is by educating and encouraging clients to adopt a cybersecurity measure, offering premium reductions if they have systems like MDR, right? And highlight the mutual benefit, fewer claims, and all that. You have to educate them, and I'm going to show you how we can help you with that. But that's really where I would like to see you guys go from here, leveraging the client concerns for growth, tailored policies, a holistic approach, right? You're not just doing, you know, some sort of a liability policy or employee policy. You're doing everything, right? You don't want other agents to come snoop around your customers. You want to try to get them all yourself. So that's the thing. Okay, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's talk about that, because think about incident, right? Like phishing attacks leading to a customer PII breach, compromising customer information, immediate action. That's the ugly, right? If someone doesn't have cyber liability policy and no cybersecurity, that is the ugliest thing. And I've seen hundreds of these. I have people that call me when it's too late. I had a guy that called me to make about 50 million a year making this plastic for food, and there was no way I was going to touch that. They were too late. They didn't have backups. They had to start from zero. They became a customer after, but they couldn't restore their data. The previous IT didn't even have a backup. So that is the real ugly, right? When they don't have a way to get money for that, they don't have a policy, massive out-of-pocket expenses. And by the way, another thing about NDR is that it also tells you where these threats came from. So there's forensic attachments to that that can trace back where this came from. How'd you got it? You know, I don't know if you guys ever been in an investigation of a cybersecurity breach, but it's pretty intense. Like these insurance people want to know everything, where it came, how it happened, what did you have in protections, all of that. So it's pretty nasty. It's going to strain your relationship with your customers, loss of business. We said 6 out of 10 go out of business. And it's a negative reputation and impact, right? So that is the ugly. The bad, right? It does have a cyber liability policy. Maybe you sold one, right? The incident happens, encrypts all the data, but it gets in touch with the insurance company and their policy covers some of that, right? The outcome will be the cybersecurity team mitigates the attack. So the IT company maybe has some backups, that kind of thing. They pay them. Most of the costs are covered by the policy. There's minimal business disruption, client trust, renewals, upsells, referrals. That's the impact for you and your agency, right? That's really the next. Sorry, my slide's not moving. That's really the next. But the greatest thing for me, which is the good, will be client C, a golden standard where you're protecting cyber liability policy and you know that they're doing some very robust cybersecurity. The incident happens, immediate action is taking, everything goes back to normal, maybe isolated with an MDR before it even happens. They notify the insurance agent as a precaution and compliance. The outcome is that they have a robust cybersecurity defense to prevent the attack. They had an MDR, nothing ever really breached. It was contained within the first attempt. Boom, done. The strong cybersecurity measures eliminated any need for cyber liability policy. Business operations not affected, right? The impact in your business is that it validates everything that you've been talking about, right? As a trusted advisor to these businesses, it creates loyalty from your customers, right? They look at you and they go, man, this agency knows my business. And the marketing and growth from that, you can get referrals. It's an amazing thing. So those are the things that I will advise on from a business perspective. But an MDR can be part of that amazing trifecta, right? Endpoint security, zero trust, right? When you think about endpoint security, it's a cybersecurity solution. It just mitigates everything. There's nothing left behind, right? So that's the crucial piece, the definition of a real zero trust architecture. When you think about zero trust, so let's think about like your agencies. You have maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 different systems, AMS, email, maybe some Radar, maybe some Adobe or something else. So there's like 5, 6 systems that you use every day, maybe more. When you have a zero trust architecture with MDR, those systems have been put in this vault. Any other thing that tries to install or anything else will not be allowed. It's not trusted, right? So now you're really protecting those systems. Some of you had a question before about, AMS and all this stuff. Like once you put them in this protected bubble, there's nothing going on in there. So that's another thing you have to think about it as an insurance underwriter, right? This zero trust architecture and the security umbrella of that, considering a full MDR. When you think about Office 365, AMS, these systems, again, they're on the cloud. You're not even seeing them, right? Who's monitoring that? How do you know there's no one in that Office 365? How do you know that someone's not in there right now? You don't. And that's what MDR does. So it's a holistic approach of the whole system, monitoring, leveraging people and human, right? There's a human component and there's a trust from it. So we're not gonna break, we're gonna go straight because we only have another 40 minutes, maybe 30 something minutes. So, but here's some questions about cybersecurity challenge. Number 1, why are insurance agents potentially missing out on revenue stream? Number 2, how can insurance agents bridge the knowledge gap and persuade businesses of the imminent cyber risk? Number 3, which of the following statements makes a compelling case for cyber liability policy? Number 4, why might a business owner initially resist purchasing a cyber liability policy? And number 5, as an insurance agent, how can you combat the common myths surrounding cyber threats? Those are the questions from Dora. And we're gonna move real quick because we had some more stuff to cover. But here's some of the answers. You can take a screenshot of that or just write them down. I recommend you taking a screenshot of that, maybe use it into your practice. Okay, so I'll go all the way to the end with Q&A. So how can you fight back? How can your agency help your customers better? That's the real question, right? Understanding the nature of cyber threats. I hope today I empower you with some of those ideas on how you can go and talk to your customers about cybersecurity, especially the ones that you know that may need it, and you, obviously, your organization, right? But everyone must perform at some point a cyber risk assessment. Somebody asked before about the insurance companies doing risk assessments. Look, I think that whole fear factor that some of these practices are doing. I've seen some assessment that I'm saying to myself, how did they even get this information? Like they're saying, oh, you had this breach. You had, unless you're inside the network, unless you have done this assessment inside the network, how do you even know this information? They're guessing it, right? Some of these things are guessing what they have. So, but like I said before, if not just Office 365, but all those passwords and things that you use every day, your progressive accounts, your raters, your bank accounts, all this information. This is actually an example of one assessment I did where you can see all these passwords and stuff that were accessible to a hacker. We hashed them, meaning putting the stars on them because for security reasons, but that's accessible to a hacker. And as you can see here, these are some, looks a little busy, but here, these are computers and people that were breached. You can see some personal identifiable information that was sitting on people's computers. Office 365 tokens installing, which makes it easy for a hacker to get into that account. So those are the things we see every day on the risk assessment, right? These are examples. PII, security, but everyone must develop and implement a cybersecurity program, right? Having proof of that, training people, all these things that are even outlined in the DFS outlines or any other law that's out there, pretty much the same thing, right? So what is the number one cause of cybersecurity breaches? Let's see if anybody can answer that question. Maybe put it in the comment section to guess what is the number one. Humans, right? The person. The 80% of all breaches are caused by somebody. It's not that they're breaching systems, they're breaching people. And so, but we have to train everybody. We have to really work on the fact that our employees may not be well trained. They get an email, they don't know what to read, they don't know what's in them. As a matter of fact, one of the requirements from DFS is that, to train your employees, right? Here's an email from an insurance company. This is actually a legitimate email that came through. I think this was forwarded by one of our customers to us from Northwestern Mutual. But look, it was a spoof email, had a phishing link on it. So when you clicked on that, it took your username and password. You know how many people fell victim to that? But a good employee training would have helped them determine it, right? So here's Dora again. I promise it might be the last one. But before deploying any cybersecurity strategy, what steps should we take? Once vulnerable or vulnerabilities are identified, what's an agency's next line of action? Take a screenshot of this, guys. I'm gonna go real quick here, just because we're running out of time and I want to cover some more things. But take a screenshot of this because this may help you sell more policies. And here are the answers, by the way. But we'll go through Q&A. So how do you do this? Like, how do you empower yourself as an agency with all these regulations and things? And how do you empower your customers, right? So the answer is, in our case, partnering with a company that protects you from a holistic approach, one that's looking at everything: computer, system, cloud, multi-factor, emails, all of it as a one package. We call it Cyber Shield 365, by the way. And when we provide this service, It's all inclusive. So whoever gets this product, we're not leaving anything. There are almost all of them are non-negotiables. So the next generation antivirus, and so companies like us can do cybersecurity completely done for you, where you're looking at your next generation multi-factor authenticator, right? Single sign-on, passwordless. There's so many new systems. Apply Systems has this thing called single sign-on, which is phenomenal. You just have to really work at it to get it implemented. But once you do it, it's a beautiful thing. It's a single sign-on for multiple systems, which means that with one click, you go into Office 365, you go into Apply, it uses the same security. Very well done. Tracking every asset, like every computer, every system that accesses. You know, a lot of people tell me, Walter, why are we monitoring people's email on phones? Well, if that person leaves, all that data stays on that phone, right? So tracking all those assets, having the ability to wipe it out when somebody leaves, remove that data, it's super important because that's PII, right? So partnering with a team that understands this, it's a no-brainer because it's a very different, like I said before, it's a very different way of looking at things. Cybersecurity and IT support, two different things, very different. So Cyber Shield, here's a price comparison of Cyber Shield, by the way. I don't know if it's so somebody with that MDR. This is the price. By the way, we took this from the internet. This is a potential data breach of 10 employees with a 200 client book of business. In the end, it's about $236,000, right? If you had MDR, you're talking about $10,000. So it's a big difference. And plus, you don't have to go through all the headache, right? So it's really a great return on your investment. What we've done is we partner with a lot of insurance agencies in which we provide a landing page branded to your name. If you want to partner with us, we do that. And your customers, you can send your customers to those websites to do that. So, and this is a great way to get a free cybersecurity assessment. We do it under your name. You do it as an add-on to your customers. It seems like you're doing a great thing for them, and it builds that trust and credibility that you're trying to help them. So we have partnered with several insurance agencies that provide this type of risk assessment for free to their customers. So if you're looking to partner with us and augment that offer, your cybersecurity offering, this is my information. Or you can go to this website /partnership. So it's motiva.net/partnership. And again, a lot of agents have taken advantage of that. And so we gotten to the end, Sue. We could open it up for Q&A.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Cool. So before we start, I just want to thank you all for your time. It's been my pleasure to show you some of this content. I really hope that you have a different idea about how to position yourself with your customers as well as protecting your own agency. And I want to thank the Big I too for this opportunity. It's a great collaboration. They do a lot of work for you guys. It's an amazing organization. So let's go with some questions, Sue.
Yeah, one quick thing. The attendance poll was up when your information was on the screen. Would you mind putting that back up? I will email everybody a copy of Walter's presentation along with any questions that we're not able to get to today. I'll put something together and get it out to everybody. But we do have some questions that we can do just to wrap up the last, time is it? 20 minutes. Okay.
Let's go.
All right, let's see. Okay, who are the biggest perpetrators of ransomware and social engineering attacks? I've read that there are law firms that track the criminal organizations committing these crimes and that strategize based on their past record of negotiating with them.
Biggest perpetrators. I mean, they're groups. They're different groups. I mean, I will say which countries. China is big. India is big. There are certain policies that we deploy. Ukraine is big, by the way. There are a lot of policies that we deploy in terms of blocking certain countries. That includes all these countries by default, unless you're doing some sort of international business with outside of the US. But it's not one specific group. I mean, there's a there's a town in Bulgaria that is one of the poorest towns, but everybody drives a Ferrari. So just to give you an idea, it's random.
Okay, the next one, backup is time consuming. Do you recommend a specific framework for online backups that is feasible in an insurance agency environment?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a loaded question because backup should not be time consuming. And again, I don't know what you're backing up. If you're talking about, let's say, your emails, back in the 90s, yes, it was time consuming for us. And I came from that era, so I could tell you all about it. But it was time consuming because backup failed and you had to have these different services that backed up Exchange and all that. In 2023, all this backup happens in real time. So for example, Office 365, we have when we do these non-negotiable packages that we sell, essentially that includes a cloud-to-cloud backup. What that means is that as you're saving things in real time, that's going somewhere else outside of the Microsoft cloud, and it's perpetual, right? So if 20 years from now you need an email, you're gonna get it. It's not deletable at all. So backup should not be time consuming. If you're talking about other systems, or I'll have to know what you're backing up to tell you, but most systems today are not time consuming.
I like this question. Is Venmo safe?
Venmo. Well, look, I'll go back to multi-factor, right? If you have secure Venmo and enable multi-factor, sure. It depends who you send the money to. I only use Venmo for my daughter. Aside from that, I really don't. I mean, you have if there was a stranger that I don't know who it is asking me for money and I can't call them to verify that it's them, it could be Venmo, it could be Zelle, it could be anything. It's not safe, right? So just be careful who you send the money to.
In the example you gave about the resume hack, would an MDR have caught and responded to that?
100%. In real time, by the way. And let's just go through a couple of scenarios there, right? First of all, more than likely, if you're working with us, it will the endpoint security, which we used to call them antivirus, would have caught it immediately. Would have isolated it. It's based on machine learning, so it would have isolated it. Let's say it was so new and it was so good that it bypassed that. Then boom, the MDR will catch it. It will mitigate it in real time. And let's say you continue. It was even better than anything we've ever seen before. And it started to spread to the next computer or whatever. The MDR mitigates that because there's something called lateral movement when it comes to cybersecurity threats. What happens is hackers come in, they get a hold of one computer, more than likely you're using the same administrator, username and password on other computers, which IT companies had this horrific practice, by the way. And then they start moving laterally to others, right? So what MDR does is it mitigates it, kicks them out, and it locks it. So it's a whole different approach.
Are MDRs only for businesses, and should an MDR be considered for personal computers rather than an antivirus?
So an MDR is not a replacement of an antivirus. I just want to make that clear. We're seeing a lot of MDR because of the cost of MDR, mostly in businesses. But then again, one would argue that if you look at the way you work today, that a lot of stuff that you do in your work computer is also personal, right? Especially if you're working remotely. So the line between personal and business, if you're in a business and you're running a business or maybe part of a business, I always tell the business owners, if you have somebody working remote, I need to secure that machine also, because they're accessing your information from there as well.
Is MDR typically a package one can purchase, standard with options, or is it totally customized and set up for the agency needs? Furthermore, is an agency doing most business online easier or more difficult to manage?
And MDR is sold only to cybersecurity companies. In the world of IT services, there are companies that do manage IT services, and there are companies that do manage security services. The ones that do security, like Motiva, we have partnerships with these companies that make and sell MDR. So we buy them as packages, and they're not sold to the public. The question about on-premise or on the cloud, it's a phenomenal question, because it is also a misconception. If you're working on premise, right, you can literally walk to your office next door, unplug that server if you had a threat that there was somebody breaching you. Power went off, you're done. But if you're on the cloud and you're managing all these cloud systems, how do you stop it? So from a cyber breach idea, I want you to think about these cloud systems being more accessible to be breached, because they're on the cloud, they're accessible to anybody. Just like the AMS example I showed you, they're on the cloud, right? It's a matter of protecting it all. So I will say that cloud is harder to protect. I know, I get it. They sold it to you. They told you this. They sold, salespeople are great. They tell you like, oh, this is more protected on the cloud. But in the end, it's up to you to protect it.
Are MFA companies readily available?
So MFA is not a company. Multi-factor authentication is a security method that companies can opt to have or not, right? So I'll give you an example. Office 365, Microsoft, they have multi-factor. Facebook has multi-factor. So it's not when you talk about duo or authenticators or all these products, those are mechanisms of which you could enable your multi-factor from that provider, but who's really giving you the multi-factor to put in that box is whoever's making that software, right? So in the case of AMS, they have to enable that you can set up multi-factor, right? So I want you to think as multi-factor as whoever you do business with, whether it's a bank, AMS, Applied, whoever, that they allow you to set up multi-factor in their systems. That in 2023 is becoming like a standard, right? If you're dealing with a software that does not have multi-factor enable or capabilities, run. See if you can get another one, because they're not following the security standards, and more than likely there's a reason for that.
Can you talk about what the minimum requirements the DFS has in place for insurance agencies?
Sure. Let me just bring up that slide. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. These are the limited exempt requirements as of right now. The big guy can advise you more on what's coming, but this is what it is right now. There are 8 components to it. And if you're limited exempt, meaning you're less than 10 employees, make less than $5 million in gross revenue, or have less than $10 million in year-end total assets, then you fall into the limited exemption category. And these are basically, you can take a screenshot of these, but these are the requirements as of right now. If you don't fall on that, then there's more stuff you need to do for larger organizations. Like I said, maybe the big guy could talk a little more about that, but I know there are some changes coming up with with the regulation.
We currently have an EDR instead of an MDR. What are the reasons we should change to an MDR?
Well, an EDR is just telling you that there's a breach. Good luck with that, because if you got that message on a Sunday at 3 o'clock in the morning, I could almost guarantee you no one's up. So an EDR is great at telling you what's happening, but it's not resolving the issue, right? You're still relying on your IT company to hopefully get in there. Unless you hire them for 24/7, you're not mitigating that problem, is what I'm saying.
Is CyberShield 365 available for individuals as well as agencies?
Currently not. I mean, if you're an insurance broker, yes. Is that what you mean by individual, or just like a person who is not a licensed broker? If you are a licensed broker, then yes. If you just if you're not, then no. It's more for business.
Okay. Your opinion on our post?
Personally, not much of it. I mean, I try not to have a strong opinion about how these things happen. I think about it more of a solution for the problems, but I really rather not have an opinion. I see one about a bank. We have MFA. We are a bank-owned agency in New York. We have MFA for all of our systems, and more or less we are required to have this by the bank or New York laws. Yes, we're looking at a new system to quote health insurance, but they don't offer multi-factor for their online system. Any other options we can implement to have this on our end? Okay, if you're a bank, you more than likely have a cybersecurity team or somebody who does compliance in your bank. I will bring that question to them, because from here, it looks like, you know, even DFS laws says that whoever you do business with have to comply with some of the regulations, multi-factor being one of them. So I will bring that to them.
Okay, I don't have any more questions. A few people are chatting in a few different things, but I don't have any more questions. We'll give it a minute here if anyone has anything else they want to ask Walter. That would be great. A couple things on our end. We are going to do our very best to get CE certificates issued to you by end of day Friday. We had 348 people on this webinar, which is fantastic. We are so delighted that we were able to offer you this member benefit. And we're so glad you were able to attend. Oh, I think another question came in. What are your thoughts about Bitdefender?
So there's only really two endpoint security systems that I personally will endorse. And that will be something we call Sentinel-1. And there's one more that I'm blanking out on that we don't use, but it's really good. Those are the only two that are really, I'll find the name for the other ones too, so we can email people when you send that email, but okay. None of them are sold to the public anyway. As far as the ones that are sold to the public, if you're independent agent, I honestly don't, the ones that are out there right now, they're just too late to see these threats. I honestly, if you want to email me directly, my information is there. I'll be happy to give you some recommendations. But I honestly wouldn't recommend any right now that I see out there.
Okay. Will, but there was one more in here.
By the way,
don't see. Sorry, Walter.
I'm sorry. I just
No, you're
wanted
fine.
to address the one about our post. I mean, I don't know if they were referring to the Outlook add-in. Like I said before, I really don't have an opinion on it because I don't particularly use it. I know some customers use it, but we're fine with it. I don't know if that's the one that they were referring to.
There was one more. I don't see where to report emails in Outlook. Can you advise on that?
Yeah, let me just show you real quick. And are you using? I don't know if they're using the Outlook. When you select in Outlook, let me see. Give me one sec. If you're using the Outlook, if you're using the regular Outlook, let me just share my screen. Give me one second. I'm sorry.
While you're looking for that, Walter, I just wanted to mention that changes are coming from the New York State DFS with regard to cyber. There are some changes coming, and once all of that gets situated, we'll obviously be advising our members.
Okay. Let me know if you see my screen right now. Yeah, right?
Yep,
Okay.
I see it. Looks good.
Yeah, so if you're using just regular Outlook, and I'm on a Mac, by the way, so it might be a little bit different, but there's a thing here called report. And when you click on that, you report it to junk or phishing. By doing so, you're telling Microsoft that you found that this is a phishing email or junk, right? If you're using the Outlook on the web, it's very similar. It depends on the version of Outlook, but that's where it lives.
Okay. Do you recommend any VoIP? Am I saying that right?
VoIP,
VoIP
voice over IP
systems
phones.
that are cloud-based for phones.
I just saw a breach yesterday for VoIP provider. I recommend ours. That's a shame. That's a shameless plug. No, only because we use a very robust vendor. If you go just motiva.net/VoIP, we recommend that. I mean, it's a very big company. They put a lot of money on R&D, and security is actually they're one of the few that have multi-factor for VoIP. And you get, you know, there's a concept I briefly touched on called single sign-on, which is this concept where you sign on or multi-factor to one system, and then as you're working your day throughout other applications, they're all bound by the same sign-on. Apply Systems is starting to implement that. And if you use, like we set up customers with Office 365 single sign-on, which you don't pay extra as part of your subscription. And if you attach Applied, Outlook, and all of that to that single sign-on, you're securing all those systems in one shot. That will be a recommendation.
One more came in. I also wanted to mention before I forget, if you have not complied with the New York State compliance, please make sure you get that done. And another reminder, if you hire someone new, change jobs, or are newly licensed, you have 30 days to file for an individual exemption. Question, if we just move the suspicious email to junk, that is not considered reporting?
Correct. That is not. And by the way, if you need help complying with DFS, just shoot me an email. I mean, we help companies to do that. But yeah, you're not really reporting unless you report it.
No more questions.
Awesome.
Thank you everyone for the kind comments. Like I mentioned earlier, I'll get everything together, email it out to all of the attendees. We appreciate you very much. And Walter, we appreciate you very much. Thank you so much. Everyone have a fantastic day.